I'll never forget it. I marked some fish on my depth finder, and I was like, I'm going to go up to the shoreline, but while I'm out here, I'm going to drop a slip cork with a shiner on it, like 25 feet deep where those fish were, and then I'll just leave the bail open and take the boat up to shoreline and then get my other stuff ready. And I remember I did that, and I got up to the shore, which was like, really close. And I looked back, and my bobber was gone. I was like, dang, I got a fish on there. So I set the hook, and I remember that crappie come up to the surface, and I was just like,
This is the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast. Thanks for tuning back in today. I'm welcoming back one of my great friends, the one and only Mr. Derek York. Derek, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Good. Just been working on the big workboat today, getting ready to go play with some big sharks, hopefully tomorrow. So good to talk to you as always.
Well, I don't know about that. I was just down at your house, like a week ago? Is that?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, something like that. Yeah. It's been a couple weeks.
It's been moving fast, but yeah, man, I got to go down and visit you and Chester down in Texas for a few days. I was filming some stuff for him. Then we got to go out fishing, which I want to talk about because that was so much fun.
Yeah.
It was my first experience really like real deal ocean fishing. How many, lay it out. Like, what were we doing out there? Because you know a lot better than me. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, we had limited time, so we had, basically a half day, but the weather was perfect. So that day in particular, I really wanted to get you out and try to catch you a big shark. And we accomplished that goal. We had a couple other things that we were looking for too, as far as like just pelagic fish, which are fish that basically cruise the oceans around the world. They can be found all around the world. And in the warmer months here, we get a lot of these pelagic species coming in near Galveston, which is where we're at, up kind of on the northern end of Texas along the Gulf Coast. And we looked for cobia and triple tail, and we seen both and caught both. So we had a great time. Typically on my charter fishing and stuff, that's not what I'm always doing, going out, because you got to have the weather right, because I'm not in a really big boat. We've got a 24-foot boat. But that day it was pretty dang good. So we had good conditions.
And we made a video about it. It was awesome. I have not had that much fun. I didn't get seasick, which is like a first for me out in the ocean. And just being out there was awesome. It was so funny because I was exhausted from filming with Chester for 3 or 4 days. And anybody who knows Chester knows that man is just full to the brim with energy. So he's just go, 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 go. I mean, I try to be that way, but I get real tired. And so we basically met up when we go and wake up the next day to go fishing, and I'm just totally beat. And we're halfway out to these what were they? The
little gas wells, what we were fishing that day. So
we're halfway out in the middle of the ocean, and we were both did you buy a fishing license? I was no, I completely forgot. So we had one bar of service, and I'm scrambling on your phone trying to buy a fishing license, and luckily it went off.
We had a bar, and I was driving the boat around in a circle, just trying to maintain some kind of signal. But we got it all done before we got out there. So it's not the first time that's happened with somebody on the boat with me, because I'll just be forget and totally forget, and I'm glad we remembered, but we got
hilarious.
that done, so.
I was I totally should have remembered to do this, because I thought about it the day before, and I ended up falling asleep on your couch and not doing it at all. And then I was crap, because we pretty much woke up and went.
We weren't that far offshore. We were only offshore maybe 5 miles at that point, but for whatever reason, the cell service I've got down here, it's changed so much in the last year or so. The signals just suck anymore. So I don't know. I blame it on COVID. But
there we go. That's my excuse.
Because they're still charging the same damn amount of money for the cell service, but it's not as good as it was. So
life is hard, and we're out here doing larger than life things, whether it's pushing ourselves physically in the outdoors or mentally at work or in the podcast studio. Absolute Aid is here to help you focus, recover, and stay calm during your most intense moments. Absolute Aid, created by nature, made with science, for those who seek to do more. So one thing that I wanted to address before we get too far into the podcast, because we could probably talk for like 5 or 6 hours between the two of us. I got a little bit of flack online for catching the shark. And I just wanted to clarify, because you work for the fisheries department of Texas, like the state of Texas, like coastal fisheries and stuff. And a lot of time, things that people get kind of worked up about with wildlife are commonly misunderstandings. And especially like to the point where, I want to be the first to say, like, if I do something wrong or stupid, like I want to know about it. So there's like misinformation on both sides, but I wanted to like make sure that this got clarified, because like it doesn't benefit either me or you who both have outdoors podcasts, or you who owns a fishing charter and works for the state of Texas fisheries, to do something that would be like harmful to wildlife. So like what's the situation with sharks specifically? Because there's like, since they're predators, I've actually had people in person also kind of get a little upset with me about this recently, but they're all people from Ohio. So it's like there's a lot of different.
You don't have sharks in Ohio?
No, the Great Lakes, salt-free, shark-free, baby. We got big-ass walleye, we got sturgeon, we got a bunch of cool stuff, but no sharks, thankfully.
You talk to the people that wade fish down here in the bays, which means they actually wade out into the bay flats and fish, or on the beachfront, and they'll tell you take all them sharks you want. Like, they hate those sharks because they come up and if they have a stringer of fish or something in the water, sharks will come up and just eat them, and so they gotta be very mindful of that. But sharks is probably one of the most misunderstood, heavily misidentified species. There's so many species of sharks here in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got, don't quote me on this, but somewhere around mid 70s number, like 75, 77 species of sharks that have been identified to live in the Gulf of Mexico. Here off the northern Texas coast, we've got quite a few that are very common that we see throughout the year. And there's regulations on all of them. And you really got to know your stuff. You got to really know how to identify these sharks. I always tell people, if you don't know what it is, throw it back. Don't even risk it. Because I've already seen several times this year down here where people have brought in sharks and put it on Facebook and that kind of thing. And next thing you know, I got game wardens calling me. He's like, hey, did you see this picture on Facebook? He's like, what do you think it is? And can get people in a lot of trouble, unfortunately, because a lot of the sharks are federally protected. You can't keep them at all. Some of them have, for instance, the shark you caught, that was a black tip shark. In Texas, super common shark. I mean, there's no shortage of these. The population is very healthy. They reproduce fairly quickly. They reproduce at a smaller size as well. They don't have to be larger fish where it takes them so long to become sexually mature. Thinking of like great whites or something like that, where they spend so much of their 1 to 2 years just gestating their pups. The majority of sharks are live bearers as well. So when they have their babies, they come out and they're ready to eat. I've caught sharks that just probably were born that day. It's crazy, around the jetties where we're at, they still got milk on their face, like what I like to say. So, the shark that we caught that day was the black tip shark. And there's a lot of sharks with black tips on their fins. And so it is a very misidentified shark up here, especially with the spinner shark. And maybe you can find some pictures post on here when we're doing this post-production, but, the anal fin, which is the bottom fin right before the tail on a spinner shark, is black. And on a black tip shark, which you would think would be black, it's not. There's no black on that fin. And that's the easiest way to tell the difference between them. They've got a really pointed head. They look exactly the same except for that fin. And so that's the easiest. That's the first thing I looked at when you hooked that shark and got it up to the boat. And I was like, this is a black tip. We can keep this one. It only has to be 24 inches, and this fish was like over 4.5, 5 feet long. Yeah. So we knew there was no question there. And it's probably the number one shark species sought for table fare up here. Most people let all the other sharks go unless they're in some kind of tournament or something like that. Another really common shark species that people keep up here is the bonnet head shark, which everybody calls hammerheads, but they're not really. They're more of a shovel head type shark. And they get fairly big, but they're real common. You catch them in the bays, offshore, wherever. And then we have another shark that they catch a lot on the party boats, and where we were at. It's called the Atlantic shark nose, and it is super easy to identify because it's got white spots all over it, and they only get about 3 feet. But most people that come down there and catch a shark, that's the first thing they catch is one of those 3 or 4 species of fish. So, but we got lots of cool species. I mean, we're not saying there's these other big sharks that you hear about on TV, the tiger sharks and the makos and all that. We've got them here. The makos are out a little bit deeper, but we've caught and tagged tiger sharks right there at the jetties, where we were fishing, right there near the beach, and hammerheads, great hammerheads and scalloped hammerheads. I mean, just really, I never thought growing up in Oklahoma that I would be doing what I'm doing today and know, enough about these species to actually talk about them. So it's pretty cool getting to lay your hands on them, when we get them on the boat and get to do the research science stuff on them. So,
well, that was one of the things that really kind of like, once we got the shark up, which as someone who's been like fishing since basically I grew up on a lake in the summertime. My grandma has a place up in Michigan, and like I've never caught anything with that took that much physical effort to haul into a boat. Like I said in the video that I made, which I'll put a link to, like I always saw those guys on TV and on YouTube and stuff catching these giant fish, and they just like I've caught bass and I've caught like a bunch of freshwater species, but it's like that was a whole different ball game. Cause I mean, 4.5 feet is big for a fish, but like the amount of effort it took to reel it in the boat. I mean, the video I made, it looks like it's like two minutes. It's like, it took, I would say like 10, 15 minutes to reel that thing up to the top.
Yeah.
Just like continual just cranking. Like my forearms started to cramp up because I was holding onto the rod so tight and like trying not to like fall into the water. That tiny shark can put so much muscle like in the way that it swims. It's amazing.
Tuna fish are worse, in my opinion.
Really?
They pull even harder for their size. But and sharks never give up, man. They go on these incredible runs. I mean, you can see in the video, that shark come up to surface and he splashed both of us, hit that tail and went right back down. And we were only in like 50 foot of water. So, I mean, it's not like we were that deep, but he was running us all over. But the coolest thing about sharks is their aggressiveness to hit a bait, and that particular fish, we were both fishing up near a rig, and I was like, I'm just going to throw this free line out the back. And I just set it in the rod holder out the back. And I think I remember telling him, he's like, hey, if you hear that, go get it. And we were getting ready to leave, I think.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that thing just took off. And I mean, it was screaming, and that shark was jumping out of the water like a blue marlin. And you got on the rod, and we turned around and started chasing it down so we could get away from that rig, in case it tried to get back up in there. But yeah, it was fun watching. I love watching people catch, something like that they really been trying to catch before and hadn't been able to do it. So that was cool.
Well, I think the coolest thing was for me was we literally pulled up to the first rig and you casted a line and you caught the cobia you were going after within it had to have been less than a minute. There's no way.
It was like 30 seconds because you seen a fish, which I think was a Jack Crevalle, because we've seen it again. And then I was like looking and turned around, and here come this fish swimming right towards the boat. And it was just like I told you, that they swim up on the surface. They're real curious, and he was coming right at it. I mean, I pitched right behind the motor, and he ate the live bait instantly, and we had him on, and we got him in the boat pretty quick. So
he was as big as, or if not bigger than, the shark, which is impressive.
Yeah, it was about 50 pounds. It was a big cobia. So
that right there when you just had me hold a rod was my first ever moment holding a big, like on a reel on a rod with a big fish like that.
Yeah.
I just am blown away by the power that those animals have. Like, they are just strong. What's some cool stuff about the cobia? Because I'm not like these ocean species, I have no concept.
Yeah, I knew nothing about that species before moving down here to Texas. And I remember the first time I seen one, my buddy is like, yeah, if you see this big brown fish, it looks like a shark and a catfish swimming on the surface, tell me, and I don't remember what the first one I caught was, but I've caught a bunch of them now. But it never gets old because, sometimes they're very frustrating because they don't bite anything. You can throw everything that you've got at them and they just will not eat, and that's when you just almost hope they swim close enough so you can just free gaff them and throw them in the boat. But because they're not a game fish, so you can do that. But any type of live bait, is usually a pretty good chance you're going to hook up on them. A lot of people just use big jigs or like a snapper slapper lure or something like that. Big curly tail grub jig. I'm talking like one that's like 5, 6, 8 inches long. Not a crappie jig.
The little guy.
But, and I've seen a couple of these cobia or ling. Some people call them ling or lemon fish that were over 100 pounds. And we were catching red snapper at the time. And this thing, the one I have the most memories of, he was so big, he was coming up and eating 5, 6 pound snapper whole. Just right off our lines at the surface. Like you couldn't get snapper up fast enough. He'd just come up and eat them, break the line. And I was just like, I don't want anything to do with that fish. It's like he's lived this long, he can stay in the ocean.
That's insane.
So, but I think the biggest one I've caught is probably about 80 pounds, which is a monster. That one we caught was a really good one, 50 pounder. So, and they're cool because they, you might see a single like we did where there's just one, but I've told you when we were going out there, sometimes I've pulled up to that exact rig and seen 8 to 10 of them swimming around in a pack, just start circling the boat, and you're just trying to get baits out there as quick as possible to get hooked up and stuff. And, they're really cool. And they look like a cross between a shark and a catfish when you see them in the water.
They really do. They're really awesome looking animals. And like the thing that it gives me a platform to say, to talk about your skill as a fisherman. We literally went out there and you said, I want to catch cobia, I want to get you a shark, and I want to catch triple tail. And we went out there and caught all 3 of those fish, which is like awesome. I don't know. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say you're a good fisherman. But that was lucky. But what's the triple tail are really cool looking fish, which is also you can see in the video. They are just like weird looking, but they're really cool. What's so special? Why, like, you were most excited about the triple tail, even though we caught 2 gigantic fish. You were the most excited when you hooked onto that triple tail. I
just love those fish, man. They are cool fish. If you've never heard of them, look them up on the internet and look into them. But they have they can change colors on the surface, in a flash. They spend most of their life living on their side, not like a flounder, but I mean, they swim normally, but their prey position, I guess, where they ambush bait is they float up on their side and they'll lay up in the sargassum, which is we call it grass down here out in the Gulf. The sargasso weed, it forms along current line, rip lines and stuff. And so all the debris and, tree limbs and stuff gets piled up on these things. And that's what we've seen the first 2 triple tail on. And we were in there for a little bit. We kind of bouncing around from little patch to patch. And I was like, there's gotta be one here somewhere. And finally I seen, it just looked like a leaf sticking out of the water. And I just seen it kind of do this. And I was like, that's a fish right there. Sure enough, we pull it. There's 2 of them. But they wouldn't hit anything. I think I spooked them, but they were undersized, but it was cool because you could see the coloration of them, and they'll turn white to yellow, black, brown, just green, look like camouflage totally.
Yeah.
And then when we came back, finished the day there at the jetties, I've never had that happen. One just darted right out from underneath the boat, white as a ghost, I guess, because he was down there underneath my boat or something. I don't know. And I just flipped that shrimp right out in front of him. He ate it like as soon as it hit the water. And, but I mean, it was a small one, like 15 inches. They have to be 17 inches down here to keep them. You can keep 3 apiece. That regulation's not that old. It used to be no size limit or restrictions on them at all. But a lot of people were targeting them more and more as other species are getting more stricter on harvest and stuff. So we see that with a lot of fish down here now, especially here in Texas. It's kind of catching up to just the sheer number of people fishing, and there's so many other factors leading in. We've had some freezes recently that wreaked havoc on the fishery up and down the coast, and we've had to change some regulations on spotted sea trout and stuff this year for the better, which those will turn around and go back to what they were before, I think later this year or next year, excuse me.
Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this episode. If you feel like you're getting something out of it, go down in the link below and buy me a coffee. The Aptitude Outdoors Podcast is fully self-funded by me. So if you're digging it, I'm just throwing out a tip jar, and I appreciate you listening. Let's dive right back into this episode. Well, that brings me to a good point. I know, I always kind of talk to the old timers when I'm looking for fishing advice, mostly because they're who are around and the ones that are fishing up where I'm at. It's a lot of the older dudes that I get to talk to, at least. And, sometimes they have a hard time with fishing regulations, because they'll be like, well, back in my day, we could catch as many of these as we wanted, and we could fill up the whole boat with them up to our knees if we felt like talking about perch or walleye or whatever. But, I always try to explain to them, I'm like, yeah, but have you noticed over the last 30 or 40 years how you're not catching as many? And they're like, yeah, I kind of noticed that. I was like, well, that's the whole reason behind all this, man. They're not in the numbers that they used to be. So I personally am for tighter regulations, even though it sucks as an outdoorsman, because you want to be able to catch and for me specifically, get food for me and my wife, my family. Yep. And it's it sucks when it happens, but there's reasons behind that. It's not just people making arbitrary decisions of you should be able to get less. Because they changed the deer, how many deer we can hunt in this county every couple years, it seems like. Some years it's 3, some years it's 4, some years it's 2. It's it just depends on how the season's going and stuff like that. So I don't know how you feel about that, but it has to be done, because we want.
I'm all for regulations, and they do change over time, and most everybody says, well, if they take some away, you're never going to get it back. And that's true to a certain extent, but they're there for a reason. We're not just making this stuff up and stuff. There's a lot of research and stuff that goes into any regulation change, no matter what state it is. And they do look at public opinion along with the research from your local state DNR or whatever. And a lot of people don't think they listen to the public, but recent experience down here is with the flounder regulations we've had. Historically, southern flounder, that species in particular, is what's one of the main fish that people go after here in Texas, has gone down over time, last 20, 30 years, historically, all over the country, where they're found, up and down the East Coast and stuff. And they call them flukes over there and stuff. But, there's a lot of states you couldn't even keep flounder in. So we've been very lucky, had very liberal bag limits, size limits on them. When I moved down here in 2004, started working down here, it was, you could have 20 fish, you could keep 10 per day. So you could say, and this is not a game fish still, which is one of the things about it, gigging, these flounders, a big pastime down here. And so for that, you could go out and gig, and then at 12:01, you take those back to your truck. 12:01, at the time, you could go back out and gig 10 more flounder, and have your 20 go home. Well, that got moved down to 10. And the 10 bag limit, so you couldn't do that anymore. And then we've went down to 5 fish per person per day. And now we're down to 5 fish per person per day, December 15th through October 31st. And November 1st through December 14th, you can't keep anything. You got to throw it back. And the reason for that being is roughly 80% of the flounder taken out throughout the year in Texas come out during that time, which is their spawning migration offshore. So they're very easy to catch. People are lined up shoulder to shoulder down in Galveston and up and down the coast around deeper channels going to offshore, catching these things. And it's so much fun. And we've had really good numbers of flounder the last couple of years. And it was really hard for people to understand why we're wanting to change the regulations as well. Looking at public opinion and then looking at the science, the science was showing what we were seeing in our sampling. We're missing certain size of these flounders in our samples, which means we had bad recruitment for 1 to 2 years. Well, that's not going to show up immediately. It's going to be 3 to 4 years down the road. And so these, they've been looking at this over and over, and it was kind of put forth that, we think it's good to keep the stock from crashing, where you have basically a wipeout for a couple of years. We need to slow down the harvest and not take as many out. So I imagine that regulation, I imagine it will be revisited to see if it opens back up, in the future. But flounder is such a weird species in general because it's not all on the take. They're very weather dependent. We've had warmer winters, and 1 to 2 degree difference in the offshore water temperature can really screw up the ratio of male to females, which hurts. If you don't have enough females, flounder are really weird fish. They can be either sex, and they swim. One of the coolest things about flounder is most people see flounder, they got 2 eyes on one side, but when they're born, they got one on each side and they swim upright like a normal fish. And then after about a week, they lay over and the eye migrates over to the left side, and then they swim horizontally for the rest of their life. So they're really crazy fish. They're really doing a lot for stock enhancement, where they're reproducing these fish in an enclosed environment, and then releasing them out into the wild now, and really getting that going, which is helping. So, but regulations, for whatever species, a lot of times when people think about like a minimum size, most people don't know this, but the minimum size for fish is generally based on how big does that fish have to be to reproduce one time before it's taken out. If you think about it. So that's pretty common sense once you think about that, we're giving this fish a chance to reproduce and make hundreds of thousands of babies, and then you can take it out and eat it. Crappie is a good example. I don't know what the minimum size is up there, but it's the same with them. So
in Michigan anyway, there is none because their guidebook is so freaking confusing. I called them because I didn't want to get, nailed by the DNR or something. I called them and I was like, so is the minimum size 14 inches or is there no minimum size? Because it says both, but I guess like 14 inches is like trophy size. So that's like just the standard for it. Anything over that size is going to be, or something like that. I don't know if I'm exactly nailing it, so don't crucify me on the internet. But like, there's no limit up here. But yeah, I've noticed too, just at the few lakes that I have access to, like that I can fish, like, you can tell what people fish for a lot and what people don't fish for a lot. Because, like, for instance, I grew up, like, the only way I ever learned how to fish for bass was topwater. Like, forever. I didn't even have any worms, like plastic worms or anything, until, like, the last 2 or 3 years. So, like, you can tell that that's a tradition up at the lake that I'm at, is, like, everybody's fishing topwater for bass. And they're all so small, the ones that you catch, because that's what everybody's doing. And there's some big bass in that lake, I guarantee it, because I've caught a few decent ones. And so I've been like trying to learn my way around like soft plastics and different like methods down at the bottom, whatever, drop shot, Ned rigging, all this crap that they talk about nowadays. And it's like, I've had much more success even on the 4th of July weekend, the busiest weekend of the year for people just fucking off on boats on the lake and jet skis and shit, and just making it terrible for everyone that likes to like recreate on the water. Like, I was still catching bass midday on plastics because they're all at the freaking bottom of the lake because they're tired of. So like, and like, you can tell that not a lot of people fish in the lake that I'm at for crappie, because I regularly will catch ones that are, big, like bigger, maybe like 10 to 12 to 14 inches. So like, it's so funny to be able to like see what people are actively fishing for and actively not. Everyone's just basically a bass fisherman. And like the bluegill will get like, super tiny, and some years they're massive because, like people just wipe them out. Like the beginning of spring when they're spawning, people off the shore just like decimate them. And then their reproduction numbers are down because people are like getting them while they're on their nests, but it's like, how do you educate 100 people on a lake? Everybody just wants to fish and have a good time,
Yeah, crappie reproduce so fast. That's why, a lot of times they'll tell you don't put them in a pond because they'll take it over, and then they won't get that big, but there'll be hundreds and hundreds of them. But when growing up in Oklahoma, especially the last 10 years I lived up there, and before moving to Texas, man, crappie. I mean, that was like my number one thing to go after, crappie and striper and hybrid striped bass and stuff. And I did the bass thing forever, trying to catch those monsters. I had a lake I lived at basically every weekend for, gosh, probably 10 years or so, trying to catch, one over 10 pounds. And I believe me, I had a couple on. I had one on that I assume was over 13 pounds on a topwater. And funny enough, I was fishing for smallmouth bass at the time and hooked that thing. But I caught a lot of fish that was close to that and stuff. And I used everything. But back then, I mean, there was still tons of lures out on the market. Like, it was really getting going. But you think back to 50, 60 years ago when these guys were bass fishing, that's all they had. They had plastic worms.
Yep.
They had jitterbugs or whatever, topwater lures, and they had some crankbaits. That was really it. That's all they fished with, and there was 3 or 4 companies that made all these things. They were all competing for the same thing. And now, like in like a week and a half, we're headed to Florida for ICAST, and we're going to be in this building where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of vendors with fishing products from all across the world, mostly geared towards bass fishing for the most part. Mm-hmm. And like, you walk into Walmart or Academies down here or whatever, Bass Pro, Cabela's, it's like most people don't even know where to begin. And I think that's a big thing for people getting into the sport of fishing or hunting. It's like, it's so overwhelming. Like, you don't know where to start. You don't know if you should buy a like worms and a bobber. I mean, that's where most people end up starting. But moving on to more advanced stuff, I mean, most people don't know. And I think a lot of that goes back to what me and you and some of the other people that we hang around with, get into the mentoring thing, as far as fishing or hunting, is finding somebody that can help guide you on your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing, I was just texting my buddy before we started this, and we were like, because he's coming up to go fishing with me this weekend. And I was talking about, like, a lot of the time, like you were talking about, old timers, they have like their one way that they used to catch fish, and that's all they know. And now it's so overwhelming. I just watched a 40-minute video on YouTube about 20 different ways to rig up a plastic, So the options are like basically unlimited right now. And like, my dad gave me his old tackle box because I'm just like, I do this stuff all the time. He's like, I don't really fish anymore. Like, here, take this thing. I opened it up, and it's like 50 jitterbugs. That's like what is in the tackle box, and there's some jigs, and it's just like so funny to see. Like, from what I've noticed is like, because like at my grandma's place, it's like there's a lot of people up there. It's like they call it a resort, but it's literally a trailer park, and it's like there's tons of older people up there, and they all, when you catch a fish, they're all like, oh, let me give you some advice. Like, you know how they get, and it's funny because like everybody seems to have their one trick. But it's like, you can't rely on that one thing. Because I know people that have been up there their whole lives, just like me, saying like, oh, there's no fish in this lake. And I'm like, that's not true. There's tons of fish in this lake. We just don't know what the hell we're doing. And that's like, that's 90% of it. Like I've said on like every freaking podcast I've ever been on, it's like learning habitat, learning like how they feed, how they operate as a species is so much more important than having expensive gear. Like, it helps to have the top of the line shit. It helps to have the best,
especially saltwater.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different ball game. But like, my nieces and nephews, they broke so many freaking poles, and now they just get cane poles until they're ready to graduate. And it's like, they're still catching fish on it. And I remember being a kid, like going out and like just never catching anything. So for a long time I was bored. Like, I didn't like fishing because it was boring. But like, now that I understand that, like, as a kid, you don't care what you catch. You could catch a 2-inch bluegill and you're going to have like the best fun. That's what I'm doing with my nieces and nephew. It's worms and bobbers and jigs all day. That's all they get. And they just catch fish all the time. And now every time I'm there, I can't sit down because they're like, it's time to go fishing. And I'm like, what have I? I've created monsters. But like, it's so
like
you
my
said,
kids.
Yeah. the mentoring is so important. Like I would have never had the opportunity to learn about ocean fishing if it wasn't for you. Like it can be expensive to travel and do all that stuff. And it's
Yeah.
just like a lot to take in, but it's awesome that like to know people who will help you. And that's super important. I think there's a lot of that needs to be had in the outdoors world now because there's a lot of like secrecy. Like obviously nobody wants to give up their best fishing spots and stuff like that. But like, I feel like teaching conservation and teaching like outdoors ethics in general, you need to get people stoked about the sports, no matter what they are, whether it's backpacking or deep sea fishing. Like,
Yeah, and I get that all the time down here, taking people out on a charter or something like that. And I get people that exclusively call me and be like, hey, I'm buying a boat. I'm going to start fishing down here. I'm really just looking for somebody to take me out and kind of show me around the bay system, some key places to go target fish and stuff like that. I got no problem with that. There are no secret spots down here. I mean, the whole thing to saltwater fishing is water movement and bait. If you can have both of those things, and the water movement's got to be, it can't be like full bore tide blowing out of the bay. The fish won't bite during that. It's just too much pressure on them and stuff. But if you can get the situations right, it's not like fishing a lake where everything's fairly, besides water temperature and shade, most things are pretty constant throughout the day. Down here, man, you can have no tide movement all day. You might have one tidal change. You might have four highs and 2 highs and 2 low tides a day. And the days you can get more of that movement going, those are all obviously going to be your better fishing days. They're few and far between. Not saying you don't catch fish on those other days, but usually you'll have times, you will have like an hour of really good fishing, then it'll kind of taper off. And I know when I take people out to the jetties and stuff like that, and we're sitting there and there might be 50 boats up and down the rocks out there. You can kind of tell when you have your graphs that show you the time when it's projected to start moving, coming in or going out. And I'll tell people, it's like, those fish are here. We're just going to sit here and wait just a little bit, just be patient, and they're going to start biting. And sure enough, man, you'll see people start catching them, and it just starts turning on down the rocks, and they might bite for 15 minutes, they might bite for 2 hours, and you really just gotta stick with that. But you do have to know like areas to go to and things like that. And like I said, I got no problems telling people, giving some ideas or taking them out, showing them and stuff like that. So a lot of guys don't want to do that though.
Yeah.
They don't want people fishing all over them, but I've never seen, since COVID happened, I've never seen so many people fishing in my life. It has been insane down here. Like I thought the first year of the pandemic was going to totally kill all the guide business down here for that year. It lasted about 2 months, and then my phone never stopped ringing. Like I could have booked literally 2-3 trips a day for the rest of the year.
Wow.
It was insane. I wish I could have ran all those trips, but I'm still working, so I made a ton of money, but it was really cool because that was at the time, that's the one place people thought they could get out and get away and not be around other people per se, and get out with their family, because everybody was stuck at home with each other. Mm-hmm. So it was either, going to Lowe's or Home Depot to buy products to work on your house, or get out and go fishing, or go to the deer lease. That's what we did.
I would have vote fishing and deer lease than working on my house, because that sucks. But the thing that I'm most interested right now that you're talking about that, is as a guide, someone who guides, I guess I would say part-time, and someone who also, you have your day job. Hopefully not for much longer. I probably shouldn't say that. I don't know who's going to listen. But,
we'll see.
What is something good to look for in a guide service? Because my buddy and I like to fish a lot. I don't have a boat. I can't afford a boat right now. If I did, nobody'd ever hear from me again, because I'd be out on the water all the time. But like, what's something to look for in a guide service? Because I've had some where it's been like, this is great, I'm having a great time. And I've had some where like, this sucks. Like, I don't know. Is it all personality, or is there certain things you want to look for? Or
I've had some really bad experiences with guides that really turned me off to never wanting to go out with a guide again.
Same.
Especially the first two I ever went on. One was a freshwater trip, and one was a trip over in Florida. And I called and talked to, the first guide I never talked to, it was through a buddy of mine, but it was up on Lake Fork, which is like the mega bass capital of the world in Texas back then, and not so much now, but still a really great lake. And we go, and this guy, all he wanted to do is go sight fish for bass. And my buddy just wanted to catch fish. It was his birthday present, and his mom bought him, and he took me with him. And the whole time, we're in the back of the boat. He's up on the front, on the trolling motor. We're stuck in the back and in the middle. And I was just like, this just doesn't feel right. It's like he's not like trying to show us anything. And I'm nice. I'm not saying anything to the guy. I'm sitting there watching the depth finder, and I see we're going over these drop offs. And I'm like, I'm starting to fish while we're moving. And I catch like a 5-pounder. And he never even stopped. He never even got off the trolling motor. Didn't even acknowledge I had the fish on. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so at that point, I was pretty much done. But my biggest piece of advice to somebody looking for a good charter guide, like you can go and look on Google and look at reviews and all that stuff. Well, you can buy a lot of that crap. Most people pay to put their name up there. So don't always go by that. Call the guide. Talk to them, tell them what you're wanting. A good guide's going to ask you, what are your goals for the trip? What do you want to get out of this? And I always ask people that. And some of them, they don't know. Like they've never done anything like that. They just got their family. They want to take their kids out fishing. I say, that's great. Those are the best trips in my opinion. And then you have some people that's like, hey, I'd like to target this species. Oh, okay. Well, now I know. So I can start planning on that time of year, and giving you some ideas. This is what we're going to be doing. We might go fish over here in the bay for a little bit and then run offshore or something like that. And, but I like when people call and ask me about that. And so it helps me deliver a better experience for them on the end result and have them have a good time and want to come back again. That's my goal, is to have repeats, have people come back. And I have a lot of that. Probably 70% of my business are repeat clients. And then the rest are word of mouth, referrals and stuff like that. So, but that's the number one advice I can give to people is call and talk to the guide. If they don't answer, you understand they're up all day and they're maybe fishing every day when they're doing it full time. Don't call them the week before. You need to try to plan your trips a month at least out and give them, get time to get them. I mean, some of the guys I have, they book me a year ahead of time. Yeah. And so I'll put that on the schedule. And I know a lot of my friends that fish, especially a lot of the guys I know down in Florida, they're booked out a year. Like you can't even get a trip within a year from them. They're so full because so many people want to fish with them and stuff. And that's because they take care of their clients and they go on a trip, they book that same weekend the next year. Yep. So if you see a guy that's got a lot of trips booked, he's probably a pretty good, reputable person. I don't know. I just love hanging out with families and making memories with people on the water. So I hope that most people think the same after they go with me. So
I absolutely had a blast, man. I thought it was one of the best trips I've been on. I mean, my experience with guides is we don't catch shit. Like we will go out there and we'll catch like 2 or 3 fish. And I always tell them when I go out, they're like, what do you want to do? What's your goal? You'll get to the dock or whatever. And they're like, what do you want to do? I'm like, dude, I want to catch as many fish that I can take home and eat as possible. I don't care what they are. I don't give a shit if it's the rarest species on earth or like the most common game fish. I don't care. I want to go home with a cooler full. Like that's always my goal. I don't
There's
give a shit
nothing wrong
what
with
it
that.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's legal and you're paying me to take you out, I got no problems with you keeping fish. I clean fish all the time for people. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys I've noticed over in Florida, a lot of it's catch and release over there, a lot of people are fishing for snook and things like that and stuff. But there's a lot of species you can keep over there as well. So, my favorite thing to fish for down here in the bay is sheep's head, and sheep's head, you've caught a lot of those. So they're really good eating. They're fun to catch, and if you want to come down and you really go after those, springtime, man. Springtime down here for sheep's head's really good. Starting March all the way through end of May, it's usually just on fire. I mean, just catch some really good fish, and they're average 4 to 6 pounds during that time of year mostly. Nice. So But there's a lot of those. You can keep 5 of them a piece down here. So I mean, it's a good bag limit, and usually I always catching other stuff too: black drum, redfish, a few trout, and stuff like that. So
And they taste awesome.
Yeah, they taste better than red snapper in my opinion. But they're very underappreciated, and they got funky teeth. So
yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, that's the cool thing too. Is like there's a lot with any activity, any sport, any whatever, there's a lot of prestige that comes along with it. And I always am like, if you can cut the bullshit and just like have fun doing it and not have all these, like, that's why I love coming into these things kind of fresher, because like I don't have all that, you know, like, oh, well, you don't want those. Those aren't good enough. Like, dude, those things taste awesome. They're not going to put anybody off to eating fish that doesn't want to try wild game or anything like that. Like, that's all I care about. I'll catch, you know, stuff that you can eat all day long, every day. Because if I can get my mom to eat it, man, it's a winner, because she doesn't like anything. She's like a red meat and potatoes kind of person. So I can get her to eat something and she's like, oh, that's not disgusting. That's a win in my book. That's just changing people's opinions. But one thing, you know, you got a ton of experience fishing, and I know you said you really enjoyed fishing with soft plastics, because I've recently just got into it. Like I really actually like went in to figure it out in the last like year and a half, 2 years, like really started studying it and figuring out what I need to be doing and like all the different tactics. What is your favorite like soft plastic method to fish with? I mean, we can just say bass to begin with, because that's like the most common that the most people are going to relate to.
Yeah, I mean, Texas rig worm is the easiest thing to start out with, and easiest to fish probably. But I really like Carolina rigs, probably the best. You know, whether it's a worm or a lizard or I don't even know. It's been so long since I've bought stuff to fish for that, but you know, grubs, any kind of soft plastic that looks like that. You know, down here, usually trying to imitate crawfish or something along those patterns and stuff. But just like for instance, at the summit, I mean, I was throwing a Carolina rig, and I caught several really nice bass on that, man. And I like the Carolina rig because usually your weight and stuff is up ahead of your lure. So you have, you know, 12 to 18 inches of line, fluorocarbon, up to your worm and hook. And so when you're moving that lure, the weight might be down here and your lure is still kind of floating up off the bottom, slowly going down. And that's, I mean, to me, when you're fishing in a little bit deeper water, that is the ticket, because those fish, everyone I caught, man, they just annihilated that bait. And it's a little bit harder fishing that way from the shoreline, because it's easier to fish vertically that way. But that was always my favorite technique and stuff. The drop shotting and all that kind of started right when I was moving down here to Texas and kind of got out of the bass fishing scene per se. But I've done a little bit of that. But man, now, I mean, everybody's got boats and stuff down here. Like, it's all about the live scope and stuff. I mean, you're basically seeing these fish before you ever catch them, you know, and picking out which one you want to catch. That's why this year down here, bass fishing wise, in my opinion, it's probably been the most large fish over 13 pounds probably ever caught in the state. And all these guys are using, and I got nothing wrong against it. So, going out and using the live scope and these Panoptics, you know, cameras on their fish finders, to look at these. And it's basically like an ultrasound in the water. You know, you go up and you can tell. I've done it a couple times, and you can discern the different species, if it's a bass or crappie or catfish or whatever. And you can literally watch your lure go down and put it right on their nose and try to get them to eat. And it's crazy, man. I would have love to have that when I was younger, man. Those crappie wouldn't have stood a chance.
Yeah. So. Dude, I would say to date, my favorite fish to catch by far is crappie, because they're just so, like, you're fishing on lighter like rods and lighter bait and lighter tackle, all this stuff. And like, I was just trolling the other day because I was just like trying to find where they were at. I don't have any optics. I don't have any fish finders or anything. I got a freaking aluminum boat with a trolling motor on it. That's what I have. And I was Yeah. Well, I was going around the lake and I had a rod off the back and like I was getting bites here and there, bluegill, nothing too impressive. And I hit this corner of the lake and this crappie just annihilated. I thought my rod was going to snap in half. Like it just went after it. And I was like, it might rip it out of the rod holder. And it's just, they're so much fun to fight because they're so aggressive. Like when you get them on the hooks and they're just like, they're big, they're cool looking. They got these like weird hump on their back. They're just like
so good.
So good to eat. I just love targeting crappie. And I know they're like a lot of people would consider them like a beginner, like an easier fish, but they're just so much fun to catch, man. Like bluegill are fun, bass are fun, but crappie, I love it. I
know one day you'll catch one like what I'm looking at on my wall right here. I've got one that's like 3.5 pounds.
Yeah, I saw that.
I caught two 3.5 pound crappie on the same week at two different lakes in Oklahoma, around 2000, 2000, something like that. And the first one I caught had already spawned. Mm-hmm. That fish would have been well over 4 pounds if I would have caught it a few days earlier. I mean, that one was huge, and I kept it. I was going to get it mounted, and then I went down to the mountain lake down in southern Oklahoma that weekend, and it was crazy because I'll never forget it. I marked some fish on my depth finder, and I was like, I'm going to go up to the shoreline, but while I'm out here, I'm going to drop a slip cork with a shiner on it, like 25 feet deep where those fish were, and then I'll just leave the bail open and take the boat up to shoreline and then get my other stuff ready. And I remember I did that, and I got up to the shore, which was like, really close. And I looked back, and my bobber was gone. And I was like, dang, I got a fish on there. So I set the hook, and I remember that crappie come up to the surface, and I was just like, I got another one. But this one, the one I ended up mounting, it was just a really pretty fish. It's really, really cool looking, and just one of the memories I'll never forget.
Yeah, man, they're such awesome fish, and I love fishing for them. That's probably what I'm going to do this weekend because I'm just taking the whole weekend to go fishing again. But I really enjoy I'm not to say that all the new technology isn't awesome. Like obviously, if I could afford it, I would die to have that. But like,
I think my dog's attacking a squirrel or something. So,
but I really enjoy like just learning how the lake operates because like the two lakes I have access to are so different. One's complete clear water, like you can probably see like 15-foot visibility in this water, if not further. And the other one's like semi-clear, like you could probably see like 5 foot, 7 foot if you're lucky, maybe 10 on a good day. And the tactics you have to use to catch fish are so drastically different. Because I was at the clear lake. There's this spot out in the middle of it where it's like just a sandy, it's just like a sandy island, basically. Real shallow, like knee deep. You can walk in it. People park their pontoons and party and drink and shit. And then there's a big reed bed, like just right on the edge of it. It's like huge. So I was like, there's definitely bass in here. Like I'm going to go over there. So I grabbed at that cottage, I have a couple of poles I just leave up there. And it's like the ugly stick? Like bass rod or whatever. Yeah. So I'm just like out there screwing around. I had like I think I just had a Texas rig on there and I was just casting out and I'm just reeling it in real slow, dragging across the bottom, and I just feel it get nailed. And I literally caught back to back the two biggest bass of my life within 15 minutes of one another. And then like I was like, this is it. This is the best thing ever. And then go up to my other lake, the darker one, try and do the same thing. And like, I'm not getting any bites. So I was like, I'm just going to try to drop shot. And as soon as I put a drop shot on it, they were just like annihilating it, like back to back to back. It's just so weird how different tactics work different in different lakes. That other lake's a lot weedier, like the darker one. Like there's a lot more weeds to get hung up in. So you want like a bunch of weedless stuff. The other one's like clear sandy bottom. There's nothing to get caught on really. It's just crazy how different it is. So like, I don't know. It's like you said earlier, so much to learn. But once you gotta
be able to adapt to the surroundings, and that only comes with experience, man. Like you got to put in the time. I mean, we talk about this about hunting and stuff, just how hard you've worked to figure out deer patterns and stuff, and being able to harvest an animal with your bow and stuff, and you might go out your first time and shoot something. Like our buddy Lou, he went out and seen deer the first time he went out and thought he was the king of it until he missed.
Yeah.
So, hope you don't hear that. But you got to put in your time to get good at anything, and fishing is no different, and I've had the luck of hanging out with Gary Klein a few times down here at the Bass Brigade camp and stuff, and just him, I remember watching him on TV when I was younger, and reading BASS magazine, Bass magazine, and stuff, articles that he was in, and getting to talk to him one on one. And he is so intuitive and in tune with these fish all across the United States. He can go anywhere in the world and figure out the fishery probably within a day, and be able to go out and have really good success. And that just doesn't come easy. I mean, he's put in a lot of years, and all these guys fishing the pro circuits now, man. I mean, that's all they're doing, going around fishing these tournaments and stuff and learning these lakes and different techniques. And they've got to adapt on the fly, because they might go and pre-fish a lake and then come back the next week for the tournament and it's rained 3 inches and turns everything on its head, and then what are you going to do? Like, your whole game plan's out, so they gotta be able to change. And that's why, it's cool now to have so many options as far as lures and different techniques and stuff like that. 'Cause you can adapt a lot quicker now than just having 4 or 5 basic types of lures to play with. These guys are tweaking the bills and the split rings just so the lure will run just a little bit different. And it's like, dude, I couldn't do that.
The funny thing to me is how much of that is superstition and how much of that is like factual, like driven, like results driven fishing. Because I watched this video the other day, and I know that's just like the common thing. Like, oh, watch this YouTube video, I'm an expert now. But it makes sense. What the guy said makes sense to me, because there's like 1,000, if not more, different colors of plastics you could go buy right now. There's like green pumpkin. There's like every variation of that you could possibly think of, with like red, purple, blue. Like, there's just everything that you could think of. And there's every variation of every color with every combo you could think of right now. Yeah. But one of the guys that I was watching that I really like, I can't remember his YouTube channel right now, but he was saying basically like, you guys give fish way too much credit. Like, they're not as smart as you think. They live in that environment. They understand like what's food and what's not, but like they're really have very small brains and they don't really think that hard. Like, if it looks like a food and it doesn't look too suspicious, they're probably going to try and bite it. It's just a matter of like how good you are at discerning what is real and what is like too aggressive or too whatever. So like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on it either. Like, I'm obviously not a professional bass fisherman, but I think
a lot of the color stuff is to catch the fisherman, like they say. I mean, it's to catch your eye, and I think a lot of it's like, there's days where you want to use a darker lure and days where you want to use a bright colored lure. And even fishing at night, you want stuff that glows in the dark to be able to stand out a little bit. So you can use the Spike It Glow, or you can dip your lures in that. I mean, I used to do that all the freaking time. And even for the daytime, if I was using a dark worm or something, like I would use that stuff and just spike the tail, so it had if it didn't have a chartreuse tail or something like that. But, the names and all that are, gee whiz, man, I think my kids are home, but, they really are there to catch the consumer more than anything. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, the family's home, man. I don't want to keep you all night, so I feel like that's a good place to wrap up. We could talk forever on this stuff. Well, it's already been an hour. I don't know if you've been paying attention.
Oh, no, I'm paying attention, but it has been. But no, man, it's been good, man. I'm glad we finally got to go fishing down here for real. Absolutely. And can't wait till we do it again.
Yeah. Well, I was telling my family, I was like, man, I got to get you guys down there because you're going to absolutely love this. So next time I come down, I'll figure out a way to get like a couple of my family members down there, because the women in my family are talking about doing this girls trip, and I was like, That is great timing, because I know a guy. So I appreciate everything, man, that you took me through down there. I had so much fun. I have never caught anything that big. I'd love to do it again, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast again because
heck yeah,
you're always good.
It's been awesome, man. Thanks for everything you do, and I've really enjoyed since we golly, I don't know when we met a couple years ago, but there's Trevor back there, so just seeing the progression of kind of both our podcasts and our careers and stuff, and how that's transcribed here the last couple of years and stuff. And really enjoy working on the podcast summit with you, and love everything you do. So thanks to you.
And everybody go to our YouTube channel, the Podcast Summit, the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit YouTube channel. Making lots of stuff for that. I'm working on a documentary from when I was down there with Derek. There's already videos up on that YouTube channel.
Yep.
You need to learn more about this. This podcast summit's going to be massive in the next couple of years. I guarantee it. He's already gotten huge people to come to this. So appreciate that. And that's the most badass thing ever. That's like the highlight of my year, dude, every year.
Yeah, well, we'll be starting to recruit guests and stuff here in a couple of weeks while we're over at ICAST. So looking forward to start spreading the word about 2023. So
and before you go, the website for Spot Stalker fishing, so people can go on a guide trip with Derek.
Yeah, you can just look up SpotStalkerGuideService.com on Instagram, Facebook. You can just put at Spot Stalker Fishing, and it'll pull up my pages. And best way to get a hold of me is just give me a call, 832-561-4984, and I would love to get you and your friends out and be fun. Plus, I'm getting my brand new boat here probably next week. So next time I come down, we'll have a new sled to go play on.
All right. That's what I'm talking about, baby.